Good evening, I am Pete, or also known as Risk for Rewards over on Twitter. It has been some time. I have not been up to date with the YouTube this National Hunt season, and it's actually probably a couple of months since I've actually been on YouTube with the recording side of things. Obviously, watch everyone else's stuff, but we are back for the Cheltenham Festival. Obviously, I've had a lot going on. I've set up the website. We've got a lot going on with the member side of things. So I've kind of focused on that predominantly throughout the National Hunt season. I'm going to do a separate short video tomorrow, which will have a little bit of an explanation about how that works, and also just a Grand National selection as well that I've already placed. One at a short price and one at a bigger price. But all of that will be covered tomorrow because I know a lot of people, they won't be interested in the website. If you are interested in my selections for the weekend, the previews, I also do a review now. So after the weekend, so it was sent out last night, I'll cover all the horses that ran and give my view on their festival prospects for not just obviously Cheltenham, but for Aintree, Punchestown, or maybe for next season. So less of that because obviously that is the other side of things. Today I'm strictly here to talk Cheltenham and Cheltenham itself. We're going to cover the bankers and blowouts for the 2024 festival. I did this last year. It was fairly popular. It is a little bit harder at the moment because obviously one, we're 3 weeks out. Two, we don't know what Willie Mullins is doing. I mean, we don't ever know what Willie Mullins is doing with a lot of his horses. So there's a little bit of guesswork, but I will give you my best. I'm not going to sit here and splinter up and go, oh, well, maybe a banker, maybe a blowout. I'm going to give you my opinion. Some will be right, some will be wrong. But I'll also give my opinion on the price side of things because obviously it's one thing saying a banker or a blowout when it's a 1-3 shot compared to a 5-2. 5-2 is the biggest we're going. So I have picked out, I do believe it is, how many favourites have I gone for? We are covering 14 favourites, but of which Ballyburn is favourite for 2 races, so it's a bit of a cop out. Just flicking back to last year, so like we go through last. In fact, I'll go to 2022. So 2022, there was 18 horses at 3-1 or shorter, of which 16 lost. I mean, that is pretty devastating. There were 6 odds-on favourites and only 1 obliged. Whereas last year was actually much better regards to favourites. I just flicked through. So last year, of horses that were 5-2 or shorter, these are favourites only because obviously you could have had a 13-8 shot. For example, obviously the mare's chase, you had Allegory Devassi was a 13-8 shot, whereas Impervious was 15-8. I've only counted the favourite itself, so obviously 2 of them were shorter than 5-2, but for this analysis, I've only counted the favourite. So favourites that were less than 5-2 or 5-2 or shorter, there were 18. 10 of them were beaten and 8 of them won. So it just shows it's a fairly even split. There were odds-on shots. There were only 3 of them last year. 2 won, 1 lost. The 2 that won were Constitution Hill and Galliard de Mesnil on day 1, obviously. Constitution Hill was very much odds-on. I think he was possibly something like 4-11. I may have made that up. I think it was short. Galliard de Mesnil was 10-11. And then obviously Mighty Potter got beat on that absolute day of just an awful day all round for every punter in the city. The favourites day where it just was an absolute monsoon and everything got beat, and obviously he got beat at 4-6. Unfortunately, not with us now for connections. So that was less than 5-2, and then we go down and we look at this year. So this year we're looking at, as mentioned, 14 favourites currently. So there's a difference between what I'm covering now is just 5-2. So as in I've gone through, say, odds checker and looked at William Hill roughly and gone, right, these are 5-2 or shorter. In some races there are 2 horses or 3 horses that might be 5-2. So it is very vague, but I'm just trying to give you the best shot of the shortest price horses. We don't have any handicap weights. They will be coming out soon, but we're not here at the moment. So straight away I look at the 14 favourites, and what have we got? 9 of the 14 are Willie Mullins, of which one obviously is Ballyburn, who is dual entered and favourite for both races. You've got 2 for Nicky Henderson, 1 for Barry Connell, 1 for Gordon Elliott, and 1 for David Christie. So as you can see, this year, I've said this to many people. I said this to the people on my, obviously, who are members on the website, and it's not obviously unknown. Everyone knows that Willie Mullins is absolutely dominating everything. And it has been difficult this year because of how much he can move his chips around and he can play his cards when he wants. Do you blame him for it? No, not really. It's just unfortunate because you look at someone like a Paul Nicholls or a Gordon Elliott, they literally finish the race and they've already got every race mapped out all the way to a big occasion, whether it's a King George, a festival. Like Gordon Elliott will already be looking. He normally tries to run his best ones in the Ballymore, and that's why I think he went Firefox to Ballymore. Whereas Willie Mullins literally zip, he just says, right, I'll tell you when I'll tell you. And that's pretty much what's going on. Obviously, at the same time, at the start of the season, if you said that Gaelic Warrior, who was obviously favourite for every novice chase bar the Arkle and also the Stairs Hurdle, so that's 4 races he was favourite, and now he's not even favourite for any. Um, and his best two on paper chances over fences are Factor File and Embassy Gardens. Like there wouldn't be many people who would have called that at the start of the season, and plenty who would have called Factor File would have said Turners, and now Willie's gone the opposite to the Galloping Deschamps route, and he's looking at the Brown Advisory. So you genuinely like, yeah, you're making your own destiny if you back his horses. So anyway, right, let's get on to the bangs and blowouts because I'm going to try and keep this sharp and short because I know that I do talk too much when I go into too much detail. So on this occasion, let's go straight into the Supreme Novices Hurdle because obviously, as we know, we have got a horse that is shorter than 5-2 because we have got the even money favourite Ballyburn. He is at the moment a serious issue for many punters because some have backed him for the Supreme, some have backed him for the Ballymore, and some have backed him for both. The bottom line is, my view is very similar to everyone else's, that whichever race he runs in, he's more than likely the winner. For most of the season, I thought he was a Ballymore horse, especially on his second start at Leopardstown. The way when Paul Townend crouched down in the saddle and it was almost like he just gave him a squeeze, and it was, I don't want to say rocket because loads of people don't like that emoji on Twitter, but the way he crouched down and he gave him a squeeze between the legs and that was it. It was push button. And that's what pointed me to Ballymore. A lot of people get mixed up the Supreme and the Ballymore. The Supreme is run ragged from the start and the stamina kicks in. It's how long you can maintain that gallop from. Whereas the Ballymore, they generally plod and then it's who's got that turn of foot towards the end of the race. And I just thought he had that. But then having watched him at the DRF, the way he went from the front and he just maintained that gallop, and obviously taking the last hurdle out, that's going to bring your stamina in even more so, and I think that would have massively played into his favour, obviously being a very strong bumper horse. And I just think it's hard to say he couldn't win either, and his numbers are just so much higher than everything else. Like you look all the way through, like obviously we haven't got a race in yet, I'll go on to Tully Hill in a minute, but you look at the likes of say a Mystical Power and his RPRs, like I think he's got a generous 144. Like how he's got a rating, looking at these numbers, how he's got a rating £8 higher than Firefox. When Firefox beat Ballyburn, he only got a 137 RPR. Like Mystical Power, that is so overinflated. Just that's a complete visual. You've just looked at that and thought, oh, that looked really impressive. To go from Galway to then, as you can see, I'm not the biggest fan of Mystical Power. I think it's all breeding, all hype personally. But I'm not saying that he can't win, but prime would be, you look at the form to Gigaro, with obviously Tully Hill beating Gigaro not a lot further, but a few lengths further yesterday. I just think that's suspect. Anyway, the bottom line, Ballyburn, my view is that he's rated the highest. He's got the best RPRs. He was, between him and Tully Hill, they were the two best bumper horses last year. And I think it's going to take a very good one to lower his colours wherever he goes. The option with the Ballymore is a lot of the punters have backed him there, so they'd love to see him go there. And he's also beaten the favourite of the Ballymore, obviously Slade Steel. And a lot of the horses in that sort of region, they're all a similar sort of calibre. Whereas there's a few unknowns here in the Supreme. Like if he went to the Supreme, Tully Hill's only got one entry, so he now has to go to the Supreme if he's going to Cheltenham. And it's very hard to see him not going here. Mystical Power could go either, but has only raced at 2 miles. Firefox has only got the Supreme entry. Jericho de Repene, Henderson has said Supreme all along. So you know he's racing 4 here. They may not be amazing, they may be, but we just don't know because they've only had 2 or 3 runs. And you look through, Jericho is unbeaten. Firefox has lost once when he clearly ran no race and the stable were under a cloud. Mystical Power is unbeaten. Tully Hill had his complete flop on debut when he couldn't jump at all. But apart from that, your A Dream to Share side of things is the only horse that beat him over bumpers. And obviously he was a champion bumper horse. So bottom line is, I think Ballyburn could end up having a trickier assignment if he runs in the Supreme. But we all know, and I even watched Willie Mullins' his tour on the Racing TV this week, where he was going through all his runners, and you could see how important it is to get the weight off the shoulders on that first day. and he does not really care about the punter side of things. I think if he won it with something else like a Tully Hill, he'd be over the moon, because then he thinks, okay, well, I know I've got one in the Ballymore. But if he runs, say he runs it in another one, he's then got to wait the whole way through the first day, 7 races, to then go there with that pressure. And you could tell he does feel the pressure. I know, obviously, people say, oh, he'll just win every race. He's got the favourite. And that might be the case, but you can tell it's still something that plays on his mind. So, but at the same time, he's in the similar sort of position as the whole Dysart Dynamo situation, where a few years ago, when Dysart Dynamo could only go 2 miles, and he's got at least 2 in here that are likely 2 milers. So the exchanges now say that Ballyburn's actually a short price for the Ballymore at the moment. So who knows where he's going to go. Bottom line is, he's a banker, Supreme or Ballymore for me. I think a lot of people will knock Tully Hill for saying that he beat up a weak field yesterday, and that probably was a weak field. But the yardstick Gigaro was beaten 9 lengths plus, and obviously that horse had finished 7 lengths behind Mystical Power. And I think what's important with Tully Hill is Mullins said that he's improving with every start and with racing, and that's clearly apparent, because he was awful on debut, and he really looks like a complete different horse. So I think if Ballyburn doesn't run here, this is a very exciting race, because it's quite open and you really don't know how good these horses are, because they've not been tested in the same direction. And I think it'd be much more exciting if he doesn't go there. If he goes here, he's a banker. On to the Arkle. So I've had numerous chats with a few people that I'm close to through the Twitter sphere. One being Racing Joe. He's not Racing Joe, Ginger Joe. And obviously he's Marine National's biggest fan. And he was there at the DRF, and he was deflated, he was disappointed, and obviously the excuses have come out, and he's like most of us, it's the hope rather than the like you're an absolute certainty. And then I had a chat with Racing Lee a few days ago, and we both agreed that we're in the same sort of position. And I could not stand here and tell you he's anything but a blowout, because it would be wrong to say that, because we're not trying to sit on the fence. You're either a banker or a blowout, and you cannot say he's a banker at all. But what I will say is that if you've backed Marine Nationale, like, I wouldn't be switching to any other. I look through this race and I just think there's absolutely nothing in here that excites me to say that if he runs even remotely close to his race, that they would get close to him, because he, as a hurdler, was a level above these. As a chaser, he was good on debut, and on his second start he did a lot right, but you just turning in when he didn't make up the ground, and he was being ridden fourth going into the thing, and obviously lined up with Ilete Tom. You can't say there's any part of the race didn't go to how they would have wanted it, because Ilete Tom came from the same position. So there's very little excuse you can make, and it was concerning to see him throwing his head around and the heavy ground. I've been told the ground was awful there, so it's easy to put a line through stuff like that. The yard were out of form, and obviously it's only a small yard. There's plenty of things, obviously, and there's a lot of talk about this wind operation and the tongue tie. So the bottom line for me is that I wouldn't back him, like as in going forward, but I also wouldn't lay him. But I have already backed him a long time ago, and I wouldn't say I'm deflated from it. I just hope that he turns up, because I don't want to look through this race and trying to find another winner, because it's either him or nothing for me. I'd rather just sit and watch it, because I go through these. Gaelic Warrior's not going to run here. Ilite Tom tricked me last year. He's come 5th twice at the festival. The year before he beat Facile Vega at the DRF, and he did it well. And I just thought, oh, okay, maybe he's matured and blah, blah, blah. And then he turned up at the festival, and he was well beaten. It wasn't like it was close. He was well beaten behind both Marine Nationale and Facile Vega. And Willie Mullins has given the vibe that Facile Vega is going to come here again. And I think he sees it that Facile Vega is more of a Cheltenham horse. And obviously it might be a track that suits him a lot better. All of us out there are all saying, Willie, just step him up. Even people who have backed him for the Arkle are just saying, just step him up. He looked like he would love stepping up in trip, but it's likely he's going to end up here. So I'd rather him over Ilite Tom, and I found a 50. He's just not for me. Like as in, he's what I call an admiral horse, like as in an admirable horse. Sorry, I just think that he will win if nothing special comes out of it. And then obviously I can go through, and I'm not going to go through all of them. The bottom line is, he's a blowout just because obviously what he did last time out. But at the same time, I wouldn't be backing elsewhere. I'd rather just watch the race. Constitution Hell, I've got absolutely nothing to say. Like, I don't like the prep. I don't like anything about what's happened this season. I would stand there and say to you that the first time out, I can't remember where it was. Was it Sandown, the first one? Obviously, he's had many mishaps where I think it was Sandown, whereas bottomless ground, and Henderson pretty much pulled all his runners. I have absolutely no issue with that whatsoever. That was, but since then, like you could have, Henderson's been going on and on about the 2 mile champion hurdle trial not being there for where he wanted it, or if it was here, if it was there. They've specifically moved it to Cheltenham, so for a perfect trial on trials day, and he wavered the idea of going, and then he's like, oh no, something's come up, and then a few days later, oh no, he's scoped bad, and I was just, it just doesn't sit very well. And I think the only way this horse, like, I still don't even think he's going to win that many fans over by if he wins at the Cheltenham Festival and then he goes to Punchestown, and if he can win there in the backyard of State Man again, like I still don't think. I just think it's just unfortunate. Like it was so exciting. I'm one of his biggest fans. I got some good prices on him, and he was one of my biggest wins last year. At the Champion Hurdle, but it's just not been, like, I'm a huge racing fan and I'm a huge fan of this horse, but I just think you could do so much more with him. And I know they'll say, oh well, this has happened and that's happened, but the season starts in October. You don't have to wait for the heavy ground. You don't have to, but at the same time, I'm not a trainer. Anyway, back to the thing. Constitution Hill, is he banker? Yes. Will State Man get closer? 100%. I had an awful lot of money last year on Constitution Hill at decent prices to get a nice payout last year for the Champion Hurdle. And as soon as State Man lined up behind him, I just thought, wow, that's my lucky stars. Box ticked. There is no way you're passing that horse. And he went up as soon as Constitution Hill went up alongside. Can't even remember who it was now. I'll just have a quick flick back. Apologies. He went up alongside I Like to Move It. And every time Sam Twist and Davis tried to slow down, he put the pressure on as if to say, I'll go on if you're not going to. And he just coaxed that horse into making sure there was a steady, a constant gallop, suited him down to the ground, and he was away, gone. I think you'll see a different State Man this year. I'm not saying he'll beat Constitution Hill, but I think it'll be a race. And it would not surprise me if Constitution Hill come off the bridle. But at the same time, do I expect anything less than the Beast winning? No, I don't. So he is a banker. So onto the Mares Hurdle. So obviously one that's going to be a little bit more interesting. So looking back to obviously last year, where I was looking at a few stats and a few of the horses that got beaten and stuff like that. Like Lossiemouth is going to be an interesting one to see how her price goes, because I looked through this field and there's a lot of horses that may well not run. Like Lantry Lady, they've said is likely to run. Brandy Love, I can't see running. Obviously, they might end up coming back over hurdles, but she's shown no form for a long time. Under Control would be a nice dark horse in here, but they have the option of the handicaps, and that Iberico Lord form is strong. Magical Zoe's shown that she's okay. Marie's Rock has disappointed me for 2 years now. Love Envoy, I don't think that was a bad performance, but she's still got 10 lengths to make up with Lossiemouth. Brighter Days Head will go to Mares Novice. Echoes in Rain has not been good enough in any of her last Cheltenham excursions. So how is she suddenly going to become good enough now? I find that hard to believe. She is very well raced. Galamarceau races on Wednesday, so she gives away quite a lot of weight to two of Mullins's mares. I think if she gives the weight and gives them a beating, even though it's on heavy ground, I think that books her a ticket. But if she doesn't, then I'd question whether she might get to go. And then it leaves Ashrow and Lossiemouth. I think there's a lot. These two are a lot closer than what the ratings would say and what the prices would say. Like Ashrow Diamond's very unexposed. She was the mare's second favourite for the Mares Novice Hurdle, and then she just didn't get declared last year. She was very impressive on return. She's already proven at 2 mile 4 furlong when she bolted up in the Group 1 at the end of the year. And she's finished behind like Prime Facile Vega, 9 lengths, 13 lengths behind Tiapu. Yeah, you're getting beaten, but at the same time, it's still strong form. And the difference is she doesn't have to prove she stays. The thing with Lossiemouth is that I think she's just getting better and better. She's only 5 years old. Like people crying out for the Champion Hurdle, I thought was madness. Like she's 5 years old. Like she shouldn't even be able to do this really, especially as horse like Ashrow are 7. Like Juvenile was really struggling their second year, and I know that International was really weak, like really, really weak. Like I know she beat Love Envoy, First Street, Roubaud's just not trained on since after Christmas, and Guard Your Dreams. That's a poor race, but she did it so well, and it was so visually impressive, and she's so much more settled now. So the bottom line for me here is that I have a feeling this race is going to cut up, which makes her a banker. When I first looked at the race, I looked at it earlier today, I thought she was going to be a blowout. Not actually, that's not wrong. I thought she was going to be a banker, but I thought I'd be saying that I expected her to be going out towards evens, maybe 5 to 4. But then when I started looking through the race, I was starting to find okay, maybe this race really could cut up and you could end up with like 8 runners. But there's a lot of like back numbers in here, like as in like horses like Zenta, Tell Me Something Girl, Nurse Susan. A lot of these could end up going handicap. So I just don't know. But the bottom line is she could end up, a lot will depend on how the first races go. You could end up with an Annie Power situation where she's 1-2, or if the favourites all get beat, she could be close to evens. The bottom line is you only want to know whether she's a banker or blowout, and I'd say she's a banker. Right, so on to the final race of day one, the National Hunt Chase. And this to me was so strange because Embassy Gardens was a horse I really disliked last year. Willie Mullins would not stop talking about how it was his dark horse for the Albert Bartlett. He really liked him. He's got a lot to do, and I just thought he was weak. He showed a really impressive performance once, and then after that, I just thought you're just not good enough. And he proved that all the way through the season. He bolted up, then he was pulled up, then he was sixth. That the pulled up was in the Albert Bartlett, and then he was sixth behind Gaelic Warrior, beat absolutely humped. So he showed something special and then disappeared off the grid. So I immediately thought, I can't back this horse for anything. First time out, he bolted up again, and I thought, oh, here we go again. However, second time out, he bolted up again, but he beat some good horses in behind. Like he beat Sandor Clegane, who's not really took offences, if I'm honest. But let's be clear about it. Started the season well and is solid, if not spectacular. Was giving away £6, but it was still a fair performance. And then Desert Moor House, who, if I remember rightly, I think was the horse that beat Salvador Ziggy, but was getting about 2 stone. Yeah, Desert Moor House. Yeah, was getting £15, but beat Salvador Ziggy. But Embassy Gardens beat that horse 19 lengths, right, kind of the Brighton. Just did. Willie said that this horse has just improved for a fence, and that is so apparent. You could see the way he just really enjoys it. I did a little bit of looking back through Willie Mullins' last. Well, I did the last 10, but the last 5 are more apparent. And I think if I've got my stats right, that he's only ran more than one runner in this once out of 5 years. So in reality, this is going to likely be, if he stays here, which is all the stable tours are pointing in this direction, this will be Patrick Mullins' ride. So that in this race is the most important aspect, is having an amateur who you know can ride a race. So going through the rest of them, so what's he up against? Corbett's Cross, I was a massive fan of at the end of last season. I just thought he had the world at his feet. I thought he'd done so well to win that 2-mile race and then step up and be going so well against Stay Away Faye before he went out the side door in the Albert Bartlett. But this year he's been so in and out. And then these National Hunt Chase ideas suddenly came from nowhere. His best form was at 2 miles over hurdles, and his best piece of form was 2 mile 4 when beating Nick Rocket and 3-Card Bragg, who were obviously stayers. And then suddenly I thought it was just people were just like joking, and then I saw a few people putting him up properly, and then I saw Ruby Walsh mention him, and I thought, hang on a minute, and then I checked the price, and it was just escalating. And the next thing he was 4-1. But the bottom line is he doesn't jump very well. Like, just because it doesn't matter whether you're going 2 miles or whether you're going 4 miles, his jumping is not fantastic, and that's his issue. I know I'm not talking about last time. Last time that was, I'm not going to say it wasn't his jockey's fault, because the way he's ridden, he is always hostage to fortune. So he is being ridden. He was in a 4-runner race. He was the best horse by an absolute mile, but they were trying to teach him to obviously sneak around the back, get in and stuff like that. But obviously you're always going to be hostage to fortune, and that'll be no different here. But in reality, it's probably going to be a smaller field. So there's nothing to say that he will stay that sort of trip. But he just doesn't jump that well. He's taking chances at all his fences, and you have to be a solid jumper. I don't know how many fences there are, but probably 20 plus in a race. Yeah, you're going to be going slower, but you're still going to jump an awful lot of fences. So he's off my shortlist, especially as I look at the price here, and he's 5-2. Like, I know Connections have done a U-turn. They said we won't push buttons, and now they're talking about him going there. Nick Rocket, I don't think he'll run here. I thought he'd have a chance, but it sounds like he's going to be safe for the Irish National. Salvador Ziggy is a prime Gordon Elliott. So Gordon Elliott's got 2 darts in here, Salvador Ziggy and 3-Card Bragg. If I remember rightly, I think he's won 2 of the last 4 renewals. Yes, 2 of the last 4 renewals with Galvin and Ravenhill. And then Willie's won the last 2. And those two look prime darts to go up against Embassy Gardens. Florent Porter, I could see him going to the stayers because he's just not really gone on from his initial Cheltenham debut, and that's a more open race. Whereas, well, from the trainer's expression, he sounds more, which may point to the front end of the market, saying, okay, we think they've got this covered. Meeting of the Waters could go to the handicaps, could come here, but you're guessing. Broadway Boy, I'd write off his last run, and if you write off his last run, he's got strong form here. The issue you've got is that Connections are very ambitious, like they're aggressive in their campaigning, and it would be no surprise to see them go to Brown Advisory. If he came here, he'd have a strong chance. Kilbeg King you've got was in a battle with Apples Away and Henry's Friend. Like that was a proper race the whole way down the straight at Ascot on Saturday, and this is going to be a grueling race, whether it's good ground or not. And I just don't see how you could back any of those three unless you somehow knew inside that horse was feeling very fresh and ready to go. So the bottom line is, I think there are some fairly strong candidates, but again, just like the mares, I could see this race really cutting up. There will probably be 8 runners plus, but the quality might disappear. You're going to get Embassy Gardens and Corbett's Cross, so the price probably isn't going to disappear on the front few. I have already backed a couple in here. I'm not going to go into it, but I just think Embassy Gardens, as far as banker or blowout, I think I'd go with banker. Not because I think it's like a stonewall certainty, but I'd rather be a backer than a layer at 5-2. And I just think that Willie Mullins will likely rely on this as his only runner, which means Patrick will ride. And it does have a slightly more like a carefully selected profile, where only had like a couple of chase starts. But nowadays, you're not looking at like a 20 runner field with loads of amateurs that haven't had many rides, loads of horses that may not have a chance, but they're in there anyway. So it's hustling and bustling. This race cuts up each year now. And you look, I'll just scroll down. Sorry, give me 2 seconds. I look at the last few years, and last year there were 4 finishers, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So 10 total, 4 finishers. The year before there were 6 runners, and that was the year Statler and Run Wild Fred went off from the front and never saw another rival. It was 22 lengths back to third. Galvin's race, 9, 10, 12 runners. Like you're not getting the same big field. So I think if you were forcing me to go banker or blowout, I'd go banker for MC Gardens. So a quick run through: Ballyburn, banker; Marine National, blowout; Constitution Hill, banker; Lossiemouth, banker; Galliard Dumez, no, that was last year. MC Gardens, banker. So right then, on to Wednesday. And here we go again, Ballyburn. Right, I'm not going to go through the Ballymore because obviously it'll be the same approach. It'll be that he would be a banker for me. A harder one to weigh up at the moment is Factor File. So Factor File, I think he's got some good rivals in here, and he has got this is definitely not a gifted race. He's got Stay Away Faye, who obviously was the Albert Bartlett winner and has very strong form coming into this. The third behind Capodanno was a good learning race, only beaten 3 lengths, wasn't given the hardest race. He travelled into it really well, just others saw it out better. I think they learned plenty, and I think they'll come on for the fitness. Grey Dawning was obviously beaten by Stay Away Faye, but I wouldn't really read too much into that because that horse has clearly improved plenty from that. The concern with Grey Dawning would be maybe his jumping. He gifted the race of Ginny's Destiny by smacking the second last at Cheltenham, and at Warwick, once the race was won, he ran down the last 2 fences. So that would concern me with him. Embassy Gardens will likely be in the National Hunt chase. Monty Star, I think this horse is very interesting because some people are really, it seems to be quite Marmite. Some are just saying that's a slow old boat, got absolutely no chance, may as well go to National Hunt chase. And others are saying that they really like this horse and it'd be there each way better of the race sort of thing. And I'm somewhere in between. Like I think this has got a sneaky, like a Henry sort of profile, and where they've not really pushed any buttons. And I think you can look back to it. It's easy to forget last year his hurdling form when he beat Hidden Valley Lake. Hidden Valley Lake was giving him £6, but he beat him well when he was the underdog. Hidden Valley Lake was 8-13, and he was 7-1 on the day. And he beat him well. It was a heavy ground. It was a war of attrition. But that horse obviously has come out and won a Group 3, won the Boyne Hurdle last weekend. This year took a bit of a time to acclimatise, finishing third behind Corbett's Cross in a bit of a messy race, as I mentioned earlier, but was very impressive against 3-Card Bragg. Just out-jumped him, was just cruised past him. It was just so easy. And I think they've left this gap, this 3-month or 10-week window, because they don't want to do what they did last year. They left their Albert Bartlett race behind in the Hidden Valley Lake by getting in a big tussle, and then obviously he ran no race at Cheltenham. And I think this year they don't want to do the same, so they've kept him fresh for this. And I think he's going to be an interesting player. Factor File, is so difficult to assess. From what you look at visually and what he did on the clock and stuff like that, he looks like he's going to be the next big thing. But the issue is that obviously, one, he's not gone 3 miles yet. Two, he got beaten by American Mike, which obviously doesn't look so bad now, but American Mike is a proper stayer, like say a 3.5. They're talking about the Irish national for him on a going day, and he loomed up next to him, and American Mike just found again. He smashed Zana here and Minella Kukuna. Is it Kukuna or Minella Kruna? Check that. Minella Kukuna easily, but that was Minella Kukuna's first time back, and they never got into it from the front. And then obviously the Gaelic Warrior situation, a bit like Marine Nationale. Gaelic Warrior didn't do a lot wrong in that race. He just completely emptied. It was like he'd been shot by like a fresh air sniper. It just come around to that fourth fence. Something like knocked him, like just like the shot from the dark, and that was it. Race over. He just completely. It wasn't like Paul Townend tried pushing along to try and keep up with Factor File. They were just maintaining the same speed throughout the circuit, but Factor File just kept going, and he just completely stopped. And he had no. It wasn't like he had. People say the commentary was like he's got no answers, but like Mark Walsh wasn't pushing further to get away. He just kept going the same speed. It was just the fact that Paul gave him a little nudge. He was like, no, okay, game over. So he hasn't lost anything freshness wise, but it was hard to weigh up Factor File. I do think this horse could be one of those special ones that's gone under the radar. Not so much gone under the radar. It's 13-8 favourite for 2 races, but like as in, I do think he's very, very good. And the fact that Willie Mullins has gone from bumpers straight up to chase him, no time wasted, prime age, so he may take some pegging. At the same time, though, he's currently 11-8. So if you're saying to me banker or blowout, like as in if I had to place him, I'd have to call him a blowout just on a price perspective. I could, if he was closer to like say he's a 2-1 or bigger. Like at the moment, I can look at Stay Away Faye, Grey Dawning, and Monty Star as 3 horses that are all proven at 3 miles. They're all solid horses. They've all achieved very similar numbers to him. So I looked through the 3. Monty Stars needs to find about £10, but has only had 2 starts. But the other 2, Grey Dawning and Stay Away Faye, both on their 3rd starts, were only £2 shy of what Factor File achieved. So I just think he's going to know he's had a race, but I do think he could be kind of special. But if you're saying to me at the prices, like banker or blowout, I'd be going blowout at this current time. At the same time, if he's suddenly 2-1, not after Dex or whatever, then suddenly he becomes a banker. I know it's not wrong. You want to say, okay, the horse, like take the price aside, but most people are looking to bet or not bet. So he'd be a blowout on the price side of things. In fact, I just want to clear that up. So if we said there was no prices in that race, and you said who's the most likely winner, I think I would take the chance on Factor File. However, the fact is, of the way I've worded it, you are taking a chance. And at 11-8 against other horses where you could couple both of them up and you're still getting 6-4, horses like Grey Dawn and Stay Away Faye, I think obviously you're getting more value elsewhere. But at the same time, when we get closer, it'll be easier to narrow it down. El Fabiolo, let's keep this short because I do waffle too much sometimes. El Fabiolo, it has been a graveyard for champion chase horses. The conditions have been awful and it's not helped. Obviously, I've been there in the stands watching Shishkin get beat. I've been there when I watched Chak and Boussois get beat. Chak and Boussois not turn up. Was it Duvan, I think, got beat at 2-5. It has been a graveyard. But at the same time, I find it so difficult to see anything but an El Fabiolo victory. Yeah, Edwardstone was impressive, but that was an absolute nothing race, and unfortunately one horse got injured, one horse fell. I just think he had nothing to beat. They ran him out front. They rid him like a lot of the Irish do, right in front. He hasn't enhanced his form for me, even though I click on him now and he suddenly got, that was £1 off his career best. So, and they've given him numbers higher than what John Bond's achieved twice, including one of the times when John Bond beat Edwardstone. I find it very difficult to see how Edwardstone finishes in front of John Bond, and I find it very different to see John Bond finishes in front of El Fabiolo. I just think El Fabiolo is just a class apart, and everyone's like, oh yeah, but he'll make a mistake, he'll do this, he'll do that. But they've been saying that since the Arkle last year, and we're now at 4 runs since then, and he does make the odd mistake, but he's a big brute of a horse. He literally is more chance of the fence falling down than him falling down. Touch wood. You don't want to see that happen, because obviously then he would lose, obviously. But I think if he runs his race, I think he wins more of these than he doesn't, and obviously the betting tells you that. So for me, he's quite an obvious banker, and I hope he is, because it'll be a good one for obviously the crowds. keep on going. We're not going to talk about the bumper because you're not going to have a 5-2 shot in there. So on to Thursday. So Thursday, obviously we've got Factor File again. We'll skip that because I've talked about Factor File. It's interesting to see which way Factor File does go because they're two very different races, like with the likes of Ginny's Destiny as opposed to Stairway Faye. Ryanair, El Fabiolo is still favourite. Skip that race. Right, so on to the Stayers Hurdle. And this is a horse that I've been willing to take on all season, and I'm more than happy to have the eggs in my face if I'm wrong, because it's not like I'm taking on a massive price. He has been a short price all year, and I see absolutely zero reason why I would not back against him and pick other horses in it. You can say, obviously, if Connections choose to send Irish Point elsewhere, that is a big dart you're taking away as competition. But I also think it's foolish. What are you playing for? State Man would be such a strong champion hurdle favourite if Constitution Hill wasn't around. The fact that you've got to beat both of them, bar that, you're literally playing for third. So to switch Irish Point, I think is madness. And it's almost, if you don't get the job done now, it's almost like cockiness. It's like eggs in your face big time. Because Tiapu's not coming here as a 4-6 shot. He is 5-2 for this race. And I think that's just, this could cut up, it could become a weaker race, but is it going to become, this is what I still can't get my head around. I know everyone's saying he had excuses last year, he's older and all of that, and I totally appreciate all those things. But last year he came in with a pretty unblemished prep, and Gordon's saying, oh, he goes well, he much prefers it fresh. He still had 7 weeks off. He won on the 26th of January on softer heavy, winning 15 lengths from Somerville Boy, barely touching him. So he's probably going to be pretty fresh there. He got the perfect conditions. All they talk about is how he needs soft ground. He got soft ground. And let's have a quick flick through this race of who he couldn't put aside last year. So we're going through, and he got beat by, so he finished 2 3/4 lengths in front of Floor and Porter. And then he got beat by Dashel Drasher and Side Burley. I just think, this is my own personal view, I just think he is tailor-made to that the race at the start of the season, the Ferry House run, that's 2 mile, 4.5 furlongs, always soft ground. He took the scalp of Honeysuckle, then the scalp of Imperi Pass. I think that is peak his. He cruises well, he finds enough under pressure, and that is perfection for him. I don't know what it is. The Stayers is not like people think it's the same as every other 3 miles. They're very different. That Cheltenham Stayers hurdle, you've got to be able to cruise into the race, but you've got to be able to find, but then you've got to be able to find again. And what I mean by that is, if you watch the race where Noble Yates won recently, so it was the Cleve Hurdle at Cheltenham on Trials Day. I was there that day. And if you watched, Noble Yates and Paisley Park were the first two off the bridle. Dashel Drasher was the first off the bridle, but he had a bit of a nudge, and then suddenly he was the only one on the bridle, cruising to 2 out, and everyone else was off the bridle behind him. Noble Yates and Paisley Park were ridden along, and behind, they were about 3 lengths down on the front 3, and they looked down and out. And both of those two outstayed the lot, but they didn't just go past blitzing. Everything was finding for pressure. And the Stayers is such a unique, like a big buck sort of scenario where you have to find so much for pressure. You have to be able to cruise as far as you can into the race, but then once you come down that bend, you have to be able to find for pressure, but then keep finding. It's not about keeping as in staying the same sort of speed and okay, yeah, if I keep nudging, I'll stay. You have to be finding and finding and finding, and that's why you've got likes of Paisley Park. I just think people don't understand how much of a unique test the Stayers hurdle is. It's not as simple as it's a 3 mile race like any other. Coming that hill is an absolute grueler, and I just think he got found out last year in it. Does that mean he can't win it this year? No. But again, people are going to say, oh yeah, but what's he got to beat this year? So we go a quick flick through. You've got Crambo, who's the young improver, and he's basically coming up through the Paisley Park route, winning a handicap, doing it the hard way, and he beat Paisley Park. And him and Noble Yates, obviously Noble Yates doing the opposite, come back from the National, both beat Paisley Park, who's obviously a standard setter. Paisley Park was well beaten in this, 12.5 lengths last year. So it's hard to make a case for him being a rival. Sir Gerard, I'm not convinced that 3 miles. I wasn't convinced he wanted it in the Brown Advisory, so I'm not convinced of the hurdles. Monkfish is apparently going chasing. Floor and Port would be interesting if he runs. Then you're back to Cider Burley, who didn't run very well on his comeback. I know that would have just been a prep for this, but it's a question mark. But the interesting thing is, so you've got horses like Cider Burley, Paisley Park, Home by the Lead, Dashel Drasher. So all of these are big prices, and in my view, I don't think any of them can win. But at the same time, whatever wins normally knows they've had a proper race, and that's what I want to see from Tiupu. I want to see that he can go through. It's all very well cruising up and then finding a bit under pressure. The two horses he beat over in the 2 mile 4 race, Honeysuckle and Imperio Pass. Imperio Pass obviously hasn't kicked on this year, but Honeysuckle he beat on her first start back, and it took her like 3 or 4 runs to get going that year. That was the year she won the Mares' Hurdle. He beat her in the decline. He wouldn't have beat her in her prime, and he also beat Imperio Pass, who's not done very much at all this season. So that is one that I'm just massively against. I really just don't like. If he wins, I don't lose in it. Well, obviously I'll lose whoever I back in the race, but he's just so easy to take on because he's only 5-2. I just think he's just it's an awful price, and it will annoy me as well if you think you're smart enough to go away from Irish Point. Anyway, right, on to the next, the positivity. So Mares' Novice Hurdle. There's 2 horses that are 5-2, and I'm going to keep this very, very short. Jade de Grugy and Brighter Days Ahead. So they're both 5-2, and this is where I'm going to go interested with the bankers and blowouts. I personally, if you take either of those 2 out, the other one is the banker. So if Brighter Days Ahead didn't run, Jade de Grugy's a banker. If Jade de Grugy, these 2 for me both look very special in very different ways. In a year's time, we might be saying one's gone up in trip, one's gone in a different direction. Like Jade de Grugy looks the speedier of the types, but at the same time, Brighter Days Ahead, the way she travels, like there's nothing to say that 2 miles isn't going to suit her. She's not had any race that's anything like what I believe would suit her, and her jumping was so much better last time out, and that was her only question mark. And you look at the trainer, Willie's a little bit more quiet, but you look at the way Gordon Elliott speaks about her, and obviously he did have Apple's Jade before she went to Willie Mullins, so he knows what it's like to have a good one. And I know there'll be people throwing things at the screen here going, what about Dysart Enos? What about she's got £5 less to carry? So my view on the whole £5 penalty, one, I don't understand it. You're trying to promote mares to run more, and then you're giving them a £5 penalty if they win good races. It doesn't make sense to me. She has been smartly planned. She has had smartly planning. She's even picked up a Cheltenham victory. But at the same time, I look at the horses she's ran against, and obviously even that beat the bat, like what she actually had to achieve. If I remember rightly, the beat the bat race, she was getting weight from beat the bat, so she got £7 from him. She only had to run a 130 RPR. She was impressive that day. I do not take that apart. The form that's more interesting for me is when she absolutely thumped Golden Ace into second at the Aintree bumper. But I looked through some of the horses in behind there in that Aintree bumper, like Williamstown Dancer, Politicus, Jolie Curallen, like these horses just are not. They have not. They've either not trained on or they just weren't that good. So that form I could pick holes in. But the bottom line is Dysart Enos I do massively respect. But going back to the £5 penalty situation, the way I view it is this: if you said to me, and this, I don't want this to sound like malicious or in any sort of like negativity towards a jockey, it's a positive thing for the other 2. If you said to me, would you like to have Paul Townend on your horse? Would you like to have Jack Kennedy on your horse? But they've both got to carry £5 more, and you can have whichever other jockey. Outside of Harry Cobden, I would rather have those 2 on with the £5 in this situation than most jockeys. But even more so with Paddy Brennan. He is just not like I didn't want this to be like, and it's not like malicious. It's the fact is, I just think those 2 are such superior jockeys that the £5 just doesn't like that doesn't really make too big a thing for me. So the whole penalty and I think the reason you've avoided a penalty is because she hasn't had a hard race. What's she going to find when she comes off the bridle? Is she going to know she's had a battle? Is she going to start running green? Is she going to start going left? Is she going to go right? What's she going to do if she has to feel the cushion from the jockey? Like, is she going to react? Like, is she going to be able to jump a hurdle under pressure? The difference is the other 2 have done that. They've won the graded races. And I'd rather have that with the combination of those jockeys. I mean, yeah, okay, if Dysart Enos beats whichever horse by a nose, then yeah, obviously the £5 penalty was a perfect plan. But in my view, both those 2 trainers, I really, really like Fergal O'Brien, but those 2 have both been there, and I'd rather have the experience. So quick recap again through the Thursday. What did we have? Took us a while to find a race. Stayers Hurdle, Tiupu, Blowout. Mares' Novice Hurdle, if one or the other didn't run, then they'd be a banker. I really like both of them. And then on to Friday, so on to the final day of the festival, and we've got Sir Gino. Anyone, well, I say anyone because obviously people aren't going to know. I put this horse up at 20 to 1 at the start of the season, so we're sat on a nice price. So it's going to be strange to come here and make a decision, which obviously I'll reveal in a minute. So Magsborough, very, very, very interesting. Willie talks as a chaser, 100% agree based on what I've heard and what people said at the DRF, the visuals and stuff. And I wasn't surprised to see the horse run a big race, but obviously I would expect the horse to come on for that run. And if you think with the amount of improvement that horse could find, considering it'll be its second run of its life and clearly is a big horse, not necessarily hard to train, but obviously if you're a big horse, maybe you need to take more to get fit. So the interesting thing with Magsborough is obviously everyone's looking at Sir Gino and saying, right, guaranteed certainty and stuff, but Magsborough ran to a 138 RPR. So that's only £5 off what Sir Gino ran on his second time. On his first run, he ran to 130. So if Magsborough goes ahead and improves another £10, Sir Gino's going to know he's had a race. So I do think it's interesting the amount of people that have just basically said that, obviously just because Willie said that it's next year's horse. I thought he ran by far the best race in the DRF. I backed Magsborough, Cargeese and Ethical Diamond. Ethical Diamond's become the eye catcher for every man and his dog. He was 40 to 1 there and he ran into, I think it was 5th, so he didn't pay my each way. Everyone wants to back him now, but I looked through and he's only like, what price was he? He was about 14 to 1, I think. He was much shorter than I expected. And I just thought Magsborough was the eye catcher. Cargeese sets a standard. She is clearly improving. She was good in France. She settled much better and she really put the race to bed well. And I thought she did it impressively. And again, she's a contender. Storm Heart obviously was favourite that day, but the thing with Storm Heart is I don't know if it's got the same sort of scope to improve as the others, because already having had 7 starts, I know only 2 over hurdles, I think may improve, but I'd have the other 2 ahead. And then you go through and there are plenty you can make chances for, and that's, I'm not here to go, oh, this horse, that horse, this horse. The bottom line is, obviously, if you said to me like on the day Sir Gino was even money, would you rather back it or lay it, then I would probably still back it. But at the same time, if you said to me strictly as in from a professional, well, obviously I'm not a professional, but from an opinion of like as in money doesn't matter, there's a strong chance that he could still blow out because of the amount of potential of improvement you can get from these horses. So as I've mentioned, like Magsborough would only take a few pounds, and Sir Gino, I was there that day when he blew Burdett Road apart. But I didn't really rate Burdett Road, so I thought other people got a lot more excited than I didn't expect to be going home and finding out he was 2 to 1, and then by the time I'd got home from Cheltenham, he was even money. Like I thought it was so visually impressive, but I just did not expect that, and it just took a wave, and he's just mad. Like he's now 8 to 11 on. So the bottom line is he is a banker, but at the same time, like I do not like the Triumph hurdle races, because a lot of them have, and it's a bit like finding a winner of the Coventry on the flat in the Royal Ascot. A lot of these have only had 1 or 2 starts, so you don't know what's coming. Put it this way, if Sir Gino hadn't had his second start, obviously he'd be coming near like a 14 to 1 shot like Magsborough. So, and then he could blow this race apart. You just don't know how much improvement is to come. So he's a banker, but I just want people to waver on enthusiasm, because I could easily see Friday, the excitement, a bit like the Tuesday, last day madness, and people just wake up and think, yeah, let's go. And then the lumps go on, and he could be, I don't know, 4 to 6 or whatever. So it's nothing short on the Albert Bartlett. On to the Gold Cup. So everyone knows what I'm going to say here. Galloping the Monster. Like, it's been a long time since I've deserted him. I was very fortunate. The one time I did have more money to come was the year when obviously he fell, unfortunately, to Bob Ollinger. So I got away with one there. But like apart from that, like I backed him for, I'm sure it was a Martin Pipe. Yeah, Martin Pipe. When I'm sure he was like 10 to 1. He obviously SP'd at 8 to 1. He was a brilliant price, and ever since then I've always thought big things of him, and a lot of people doubted him, and I still continue to tell people that I just can't see how he won't return to his level of form. This was obviously once he got beat by Fast or Slow, and it was hard to go into that race with Jerry Colon with huge confidence, but I just think they were such different types of horses, and he did okay, maybe he had the best part of the track, but it doesn't matter. He could have run on any part of the track. He was always going to win that race. I'm not telling people anything they don't know. I was worried at Leopardstown when I saw obviously he was going to DRF, and I did think that it's not good to try and do these three all in a row. And it's very unWillie Mullins like, because normally he does it. He'll run at Christmas, and then that'll be it. He'll keep them fresh, and that's the way I like them really for the Gold Cup. I think you don't really want to be over raced because it's such a it's like running the Grand National. Um, but at the same time, I think what people forget is people will say, well, no horses obviously won the Savills, then the Irish Gold Cup, then the Cheltenham Gold Cup. Um, or if they have, it was a long, long time ago. But the difference in field is not like what we're used to. Like, as in, if you went back, like, I don't know how far back you'd have to go in the DRF to find probably a double figure field where you're looking at, like, if I go back to, like, say, a year with Bells Hill 2019, like, a lot of these Savills chases are like 4 or 5 runners now. Whereas you go back to 2016, they're like 10 runner races. And the difference is when you have a 10 runner race is that at least one horse in there is going to be running to their 100%. Whereas going into that one at the DRF, we knew Fast or Slow was using it as a prep. I Am Maximus is apparently going for the National, so he wasn't going to be sighted. And Conflated was using it for a prep for the Ryanair or the cross country. So no horse in there wanted to be absolutely pushed 110%. And they were all hoping that they could get away with being about 85%. So, and I just think that played out well for him. The bottom line with Galloping Deschamps is I wouldn't oppose him whatsoever. He'd still be a banker, even money, 3-1. His price hasn't actually changed that much. I backed him the day he crossed the line last year, obviously in the Gold Cup at 3-1. And obviously he's even money now, and I still don't think that's a bad price. You're going to get it on the day though, aren't you really? He's going to have more challenges, but like the challenges that I look at in reality, I'd rather be on like something like the Fast or Slow. Shishkin is just not for me. He's going to be a big Marmite horse for a lot of people. Again, I'm not going to go through all the candidates because obviously we've got 3 weeks to go. But the bottom line is he doesn't have to improve. He just has to show that he's recovered enough to run to his same sort of numbers that he has achieved in the past. Just a little quick flick through. If I look through this, even if he ran to his Savills run, he would beat the majority of these. But if he ran to his his Savills run, he'd beat everything. So obviously he absolutely demolished the field. Sorry, even if he ran to his DRF win, he'd beat most of these. If he ran to his Savills run or his Gold Cup run, then nothing's going to get close to him. So all you're going on really is you just want him to run his race. If he runs his race, which I have a lot more faith in now with his new tactics where he races a lot more positively. So I have no negatives for him and I won't be deserting him. Ferns Lock's an interesting one. 5-2 currently, trained by David Christie. I would be against personally, and he would be a blowout. Quite simply because I would worry about him in the finish. Like he got in his run in December, he was racing against It's on the Line. He did have a £7 claimer. It's on the Line so he was obviously getting that weight, but he was also getting £7. So technically a £14 swing. But Ferns Lock had the race wrapped up. I don't know, probably 2 fences out. And he was long gone. Like the race was over. That was it. Job done. But It's on the Line managed to rally from 2 fences back, and he had lengths to make up. And he rallied all the way to the line and went past that rival. Yeah, he was getting £14, which obviously he won't get here. But there's no guarantee that either will have a claimer on. So we don't know that. I'd imagine. It's an amateurs race, so Derek O'Connor will probably be on board. So he's not going to have a claimer. So it will be a £14 swing, but the difference is with Ferns Lock is that he bolts up or he gets beat. Like as in, and the problem that he's got is that he could go out there and he could sit out front and he could just get a big enough lead that no one can catch him. But I just don't think he finds enough off the bridle. And the problem is with this field is that there'll be like say 30 runners probably with amateur jockeys aboard. There'll be horses that will hassle him out in front, so he might sit prominently. There'll be horses in and around him. And he might kick for home, but it's hard to see that there's not going to be a It's on the Line or a Billaway or a Premier Magic, last year's winner, that one of those horses isn't going to come flying off the bridle late on. So it's how much he can find off the bridle. And at 5-2, I just think in a race where you can make a case for so many, I just think he's short and he's a blowout. So finally, the final one, and that is obviously Miss Dino Blue in the Mare's Chase. Very interesting contender. Her form is stacks above all of these. and many have complained that she's not in the champion chase. But at the end of the day, when you've got John Bon, what's the point? When you've been beaten by El Fabiolo, what's the point? These races are here to make this sort of excitement. Like if she was to get beat, then it'll be exciting. As in, it's gonna. This keeps this very competitive and not a wide open race. She has to give £5 to the field and £2 to Allegoria Devassi. And on ratings, Allegoria Devassi with that £2 would be not far off her. And on with the £5 she gives to the field, then they'd probably be within, I don't know, £5 to £8 of her. There are some horses in here that you could easily say have absolutely zero, not well, I don't want to be horrible, but yeah, zero chance of getting anywhere near her. The biggest thing is obviously, will she stay? Because she's never ran over 2 mile 4 furlongs. But at the same time, you look at the way she's racing in her races. The last 2 races have been 17 furlongs, so this is going to be another 3.5 furlongs. And having looked back, well, not looked back, I've been quite fortunate with the winners in these races in the past. And I look back and I think about like the likes of the horses that have won it have had to find off the bridle. Like Cole Reevy outstayed LMA the first year. LMA then got up on the line the next year and she was off the bridle for ages. Allegoria Devassi cruised into the race and was cruising on Impervious. And Impervious, when they both pressed the buttons, Impervious found much more for pressure. So she will need to stay, and she will need to find off the bridle. But the problem is, the thing is, like she hasn't lacked off the bridle. She's an immaculate jumper, and she really is a class above on paper. And even the last 3 renewals have been at 161, 146, and 159 RPRs. And her last 2 runs, she's ran to 161 and 162. So either of those would win any of the last 3, or at least tie with Cole Reevy, who obviously went on to then beat 2 Cheltenham Festival winners. It might have been Sam Crow and Envoy Allen. It was something, basically 2 very good horses at that period. So she sets a very lofty standard. The only thing you're disagreeing with is those ratings have all been achieved over the 3.5 furlongs shorter. She's got form on soft, she's got form on heavy. She should have won the Grand Annual last year, but she clattered the second last, and then she gave herself a lifeline and then clattered the last. So she was beaten 6.5 lengths, but at the same time, she's obviously, the only time she's faced defeat was when beaten by El Fabiolo. So, and she ran a screamer there as well when she beat Gentleman de Me. She wasn't given a hard race, and it was pretty much the perfect prep that you'd want for this. So I think if you're knocking her, the only thing you can really knock her on, and you listen to Willie and he says her pedigree screams that it shouldn't be any issue. So I think if you're knocking her, the only thing you're really knocking her on is 1, the price, and 2 is the fact that she's got to stay the extra 3.5 furlongs. Obviously, it makes it more interesting if it's like a stamina sap in really heavy ground. But if you get the standard like good ground or good to soft ground, yeah, it's 3.5 furlongs. But the way she jumps, like I could see her winning this well, and she'd be a banker for me. Allegoria Devassi's got a massive chance, but you just don't know which side of bed she gets up on. Like she was very impressive last time, but she was a washout the time before. Very impressive the time before that, but she's had too many times she's disappointed for me. Wouldn't be no surprise to see her cruise into this really well, but be disappointing if Dino Blue's not a banker. So a wave of my enthusiasm, just to not pour cold water on it, but just tread carefully with the juveniles. But I do think Sergino's still a banker, but just be careful. I've been burnt personally by juveniles because they can improve so much when you least expect it. Galloping de Champs, banker. Ferns Lock, blowout. And then Dino Blue, banker. So that concludes all of them. So obviously Ballyburn I think is a banker in whatever race goes on. Marine Nationale is a blowout. Constitution Hill, banker. Lossiemouth, banker. Embassy Gardens, I find it really hard to weigh up. If push at 5-2, I'd rather be a backer than a layer, so I'd go banker. Ballymore, Factor File. If you're talking 11-8, it would be a blowout regards to the betting side of things. If you say just no, there's no price on it and the horse's chance, I think he's the horse that could really be like that next special thing. So that's my opinion on him. Strange, I know. El Fabiolo, banker. Tiupu, blowout. Sergino, a banker, but just tread carefully. Galloping, banker. Ferns Lock, blowout. Dino Blue, banker. So that is it for banks and blowouts. I will try to put a lot more content up over the next 3 weeks. 3 weeks tomorrow it'll be. 3 weeks today. A lot of people will be in the pub at Cheltenham getting ready. I will have other people involved with me the next few weeks. And more so, I'm just waiting to hear back. Hopefully it'll be tomorrow. I'm looking to get a Cheltenham preview together, and there'll be a team of us doing it, hopefully 4 of us, and that will be live. There'll be a live feed through YouTube on this channel, and that will be either the week before Cheltenham or on that weekend before, but I will obviously put all the details up. So good luck whatever you're betting. It's quite a quiet time this week, but all the previews are about to start, so enjoy, and I'll be back with more. Goodbye.